Welcome to episode 255 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak encouragement into the hearts of educators and get you informed and energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm talking with Amy Stohs, classroom teacher and Truth for Teachers writer, about her article on behavior and consequences for the last weeks of school. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. This episode is brought to you by the Invited MBA. A lifetime of teaching might not be right for everyone. If you're considering moving your career out of the classroom, the summer cohort of Invited MBA is just 4 weeks and under $2,000. Learn how to transfer your skills to the business world, gain confidence in business and financial terminology, and solve real-world business challenges without real-world consequences. Truth for Teachers listeners are eligible for a $200 tuition credit. Visit invitedmba.com for more information. You may be feeling demoralized at how so many of your colleagues have made the tough decision to leave for their own mental and physical well-being, and how your principal feels helpless to do anything about the burnout and staff shortages that just aren't letting up. If this sounds like your school, let your administration know about the 40-hour leadership program. It's the latest offshoot of my 40-hour teacher work week that's designed to create change at the school level, helping everyone in the building to stay focused on what really makes a difference for kids and streamline or eliminate the rest. 40-hour leadership is an entirely self-paced program for administrators that only requires an upfront time investment of around 8 to 10 hours to reimagine systems and simplify processes that save everyone in your school building time and energy every single day. We can work with your school to acquire grant funding and professional development money to cover the cost via purchase order, and we offer additional consulting packages for personalized coaching and support. Your school leaders can also purchase the 40-hour program for teachers, which is our signature program, and 40-hour instructional coaching. Go to 40htw.com to learn more about all of these resources, which can work individually or together to help educators find a sustainable way of doing a great job for kids. So my guest today is a graduate of the 40-hour Teacher Workweek program who's really become a guru of all things related to effective, efficient teaching and learning. Her name is Amy Stohs, and though she's currently a second grade teacher in Northern Virginia, she's taught both elementary and middle school in the pandemic, as she previously taught sixth grade as well, and in fact, she won Teacher of the Year in that position. You might remember Amy from episode 240, in which she talked about what the big 5 tips for teacher productivity, which is what I teach in the 40-hour program, what that looks like in her classroom. And then last spring in episode 226, she shared 7 takeaways from teaching during the pandemic that will help her simplify teaching from now on. These are both super practical episodes that are still highly relevant. So if you resonate with Amy's teaching philosophy and her style in this episode, make sure you check out episodes 226 and 240, where you can learn more specifics about her and how she manages her workload and her time. In today's episode, Amy is sharing more about her teaching philosophy, her approach to relationship building with students, and specific things that she does in terms of classroom management to help keep things running smoothly in the last weeks of school. You can check out her article at truthforteachers.com. It's called Student Behavior Can Be Challenging in the Final Weeks of School. Here's how a blend of grace and consequences can help. And listen in here as we do a deeper dive into what she's written. So Amy, the approach that we're talking about today is a blend of grace and consequences. Tell us about why these are both needed based on what you've seen happen when one or the other is missing.
Yeah, so when we think about consequences, I think sometimes we have this really extreme idea in our head of, punishments and kind of overreactions. So I remember when we lost the ability at my school to take away recess from kids for whatever sort of behavior in class. And a lot of the reaction to that was, well, what can I do if I can't give a consequence? Sort of what can I do? And I think a lot of the things I see out there from teachers is to reward good behavior. So just give rewards, like and say reinforcing language and do all these like great things. But the problem is that I can't just constantly praise good behavior. I need to say if something is inappropriate. A coworker of mine used to joke that a cop doesn't pull someone off the road and be like, "You're doing a great job driving." And just, don't be like that person over there who's, speeding recklessly. You keep being a good driver. And I thought that analogy was funny at the time. It makes sense. We can't just ignore all bad behavior. Sometimes we can ignore things, but we shouldn't just ignore everything.
Right. Particularly when, as in the example you gave here, like that the person is endangering others. Like, so we can't just focus on the people who are doing the right thing. We have to actually address the issues as well. Mm-hmm. How should we think about consequences then? What are some appropriate ways to give them to students when needed?
So a consequence is just what follows a behavior. That can be a natural consequence, like getting burned because I touched a stove, or running into something. I've had students literally run into part of the wall because they weren't looking where they were going. Mm-hmm. And that is a natural consequence of remember to face forward. And then a consequence can also be planned. So I'm trained in responsive classroom, which is a whole kind of behavior management framework, which I would highly recommend to anyone. I was lucky enough to get that training through my district. But that has a system of logical consequences. And there are 3 logical consequences through a responsive classroom. Take a break, which is similar to a timeout, but a more positive timeout is the way they frame it. Reparations. So thinking about making it up to someone, you break it, you fix it. And then a loss of privilege. So how can you take away something that is a privilege if you're not using it appropriately?
I'm a big fan of responsive classroom too. I think it's a great framework. Tell us about what kinds of privileges can be taken away as a consequence. And also, are there any kind of basic student needs that should never be removed?
Yeah, so a privilege is something that can be replaced with an alternative or taken away without a severe repercussion. So that's the way I framed it in the article I wrote to go along with this podcast, is just that a privilege can be replaced. It is possible to be replaced with something else. Or if you take it away, it's not going to cause a major problem. You're not taking away a need. And sometimes we might think that something is a privilege, but really when you're processing it, it is a need for someone. So going to the bathroom, which I know lots of teachers have gotten upset about, someone who took away going to the bathroom because they were doing something inappropriately. I had a teacher in middle school who gave us a certain number of bathroom passes. And we could only use that number throughout the entire year. And that didn't necessarily affect me most of the time, but it did stress me out as someone who wants to follow rules. And so that kind of stressed me out. Socialization. We think that sometimes just talking to others can be taken away, but socialization can be such an important need. We need other people. Movement. I think when you restrict movement too much, then you are taking away a need to physically get up and move. Recess, I think, and breaks. Those are needs. Those are not just nice to haves. Even when we are told that we need to limit them as teachers, they're needs, and there's like a way to make that need still be met in the classroom. Lunch, a kid still has to eat. And just kind of like your basic need to be doing schoolwork. I've seen teachers take away certain utensils or materials or something to the point that the kid cannot do anything. Like they can't write, they can't read, they can't do anything on the computer. Like there's nothing for them to do. And so at that point, what is the kid doing? Like their need in the classroom is partly to learn. So if you're taking away all ability for them to learn in the classroom, what is their point in being there? That they don't have a lot of other options. But You can restrict certain things. So you can provide some boundaries around socialization. You can provide boundaries around recess. You've shown that you can't use this soccer ball, but you can do something else. So you can restrict some of those choices without completely eliminating the need. A lot of things you can take away, fidgets and flexible seating, a certain writing utensil, so you don't get to use this one, but you can use this instead, that maybe is less playful or less something else. I've taken away classroom jobs from kids before if they weren't doing something appropriately, which has had a really positive outcome in the long run because they really want to contribute. They want to do the right thing. Swapping out one station for something else. So you can't play this game, but you can do this other game by yourself. You just can't play games with this other person right now. Computers. I think almost anything on a computer can be done on paper. Even assessments can be printed out on paper and things. So there's lots of ways that you can provide boundaries around something without taking away an entire need. And I think that if you're leaning towards taking away something completely, then a better framework would be, instead of losing that privilege, to take a break from it. So to take a break from eating lunch in the cafeteria, or to take a break from recess, but you're not losing the privilege because recess isn't a privilege necessarily. So I think it's really a need. So taking away, the whole of recess is not appropriate, but you can take a break from recess, take a break from a game, and then go back to it once you've calmed down a little.
I agree with you that movement and recess and breaks are all basic human needs. Well, I mean, when I think about what I do with my time, if I have unstructured time, there's always times of rest built in. There's always a break from focusing. There's always a time for movement. I can't just sit still all day long. These are really basic human needs. So we can think about different ways to meet those needs. As you said, just sort of creating boundaries, or maybe, restricting options within to make sure those needs are still met. I feel like that's so good. And then thinking about the things that can actually be taken away that aren't required, like, the flexible seating, or being able to use that certain tech tool or writing utensil, their job, their classroom job, or the games. I think that's really good to sort of distinguish between these needs and then something that's more of like a privilege.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we feel that desire to take away something that we assume is fun, talking to someone or playing, all those things, they are fun, but they're also needs. So when we want to take something away that's fun, I think sometimes we're trying to get a student to see the problem with their action. Like we're trying to create guilt, or we're trying to create remorse. We're trying to get them to feel what we think they should feel in that moment. But guilt and shame is not our goal. And I don't think that anyone would say that's their goal necessarily. They might just be like, we want them to, feel bad for what they did. But when you're saying that you want them to feel bad about something, you're wanting to create that guilt and shame. And that's not really our goal. Our goal is to improve the behavior. So we need to think, instead of how can I create a feeling in that student that I want them to have, what action can I take as an educator that will improve the behavior? How can I get the desired outcome I want? Because what I really want is for them to behave better, or for them to not hurt someone, or for them to pay attention in class, or for them to learn better. I don't actually, that's the final outcome. I don't really want them to just be sad. Right. And then their behavior to not change. That's not really my goal. My goal is that they will have a better outcome of their behavior.
Yes, that's a great way to think about it. Not not focusing on what feeling do I want to create in the student, but what action can I take to improve the behavior. So good. You also talk in your article about fostering significance and belonging and fun. And I feel like most of the time when we hear discussions about that, it's really centering on the first weeks of school. And I feel like they end up becoming things that we focus on in the beginning of the school year to establish class culture, and then they get sidelined later. So it's almost like, okay, we got that out of the way. Everybody belongs. We have our class community. And now I can really hammer in home that academics. But we also know that's not exactly how things work. There's a lot of pressure on teachers to get down to the nitty gritty of things. But I feel like often at this point in the year, fostering significance and belonging and fun is more important now than ever. Kids are, they sort of get spring fever. They get a little burnt out at the end of the year. They can see the end is in sight and they stop putting effort in. And so I think it's important to think about, what does it look like to foster those different things in different types of the year? What does it look like at the beginning of the school year? What happens in the middle of the school year? And then what happens more toward the end as well? So I'm wondering if you can talk to us about what that might look like as we head toward the final weeks of school.
Yeah. And the reason I mentioned significance, belonging, and fun is because that was in opening to my responsive classroom training. Was what was a time when you felt like what you were doing was significant, like you belonged, and you were having fun. Mm-hmm. And when I thought about all three of those things being met, it was like, wow, that's like an amazing feeling. Mm-hmm. To feel like what you're doing was mattering and like you were part of a group and it was fun for you. I thought about being a summer camp counselor because I did that for several years and I felt that way. I felt like it was just the best. And not that there weren't difficult days or anything, but it was such a good feeling. And what a great kind of vision to have for my classroom, to make my classroom feel that way, the way that I felt in that moment, I think is just such a good goal. So thinking about how do I kind of get those significance and belonging, and I think we lean kind of more into maybe one of those three at different times in the year. I would say probably the belonging. You're really trying to get them to belong and trust you at the beginning of the year. And then you might move a little bit more towards significance with some of the heavier academic things of what actually matters. And then maybe some more fun things towards the end of the year. But we can't forget that, we still want them to feel like they belong, that they're not kind of losing that sense and that what they're doing still matters. So what does that kind of look like? I think that looks like a lot of academic choice. So providing choice within a framework, like a writing station that has multiple choices, but they have to do one of those things. Book clubs, but the book they're doing has a choice, but they still are required to read. Project-based learning. A lot of teachers lean into things more like Genius Hour. I've always leaned more towards PBLs than Genius Hour, only because I liked being able to frame a guiding question that everyone is working on the same type of question, the same type of curriculum with a project. Leaning into the importance of the work they're doing, reminding yourself to use those words like writers and scientists and we are mathematicians, kind of using those academically phrased words, I think can help both belonging and significance. Not cutting class meetings or morning meetings just to get more test prep done. Maybe it is a little bit shortened. I know that my morning meetings can sometimes I can do shorter morning meetings often towards the whole second half of the year, really, because it's just more efficient and I don't need to do every game every day. I don't need to do as long of greetings because kids know each other and their names. So it's a lot more efficient. So I don't need to do every part of a morning meeting every day, but it's not gone. So some of my favorite kind of end of the year morning meeting activities or like charades, focusing on just one kid per day. So doing a kid of the day. They could create a talent show on Flipgrid kind of outside of school. And then you can just highlight one kid. Musical chairs. So I just put music on. And then every time I stop the music, they have to say hi to whoever they're nearby. When I taught 6th grade, they loved silly games like rock, paper, scissors tournament, where you just go outside, you play rock, paper, scissors, and whoever wins, then like they go on to find another winner. And if you lost, you just become like a cheerleader. So at the end, it's just like, Matt, you have to go outside. That's but at the end, it's just like half the class is cheering for one kid and half the class is cheering for another kid. And it's just this like very encouraging, energetic kind of game. And so those little games are pretty easy to implement. One of my favorites is Kagan's structure of quiz trade. And I like having kids make their own questions for like homework or just at the start of class as like an entry ticket. So they have to make a little question, put the answer on the back, just on an index card that I hand out. And I can walk around and check whoever I might be concerned about is not getting the right answer for whatever, type of question we're writing, like write a 2-digit, subtraction problem, whatever it is. And then they can play quiz trade. So they quiz each other with their questions and they trade their index cards, go find a next person. So lots of active games and that kind of stuff can be really useful. I lean into those and I try to pull them out more when I see that, I need to allow a little bit more movement. I need to get them doing something else, like heads up with vocabulary, where they have to hold a vocabulary card on their head. Their group is trying to guess. They're trying to give clues to help the person holding the card to guess what the word is. And then when they get it, they can, so you can set a timer for like 2 minutes and how many vocabulary cards can your group get through in the amount of time that you have. It's always amazing to me how much just calling something a game is like, yes, that is what I want to do with my life.
And you've got lots of other games and movement ideas and more morning meeting or class meeting ideas as well in your article. So this is really just a fraction of what Amy shared in her article. If you want to find it, it's at truthforteachers.com. It's episode 255. Or you can click the link in the show notes and then you can see a list of all these different games and ideas that Amy does.
Yeah, so I feel like this is kind of common sense. A lot of teachers think, oh yeah, end of the year, I need to do fun things. I need to do review activities. I need to have lots of movement, extra recess, whatever. But I find sometimes when my class is actually at its most intense and energized and just like you can feel that electric buzz in the air, the best thing to do is to calm it down. So not everything has to be exciting and fantastic. My yoga teacher that I had for years, she would always start class by saying, if you feel kind of jittery and anxious, go ahead and lay down to calm down your body. And if you're feeling kind of sleepy, go ahead and sit up. And that was always the right advice. It seemed counterintuitive to me. Like, why I want to lay down right now. I'm tired. But it always made more sense. So I was like, okay, I'm really jittery. I need to lay down. I need to calm down. So sometimes the best thing was not for me to like put on a Go Noodle song or to try to play a game and get them like, okay, clearly they're energetic. So we just need to like work out the energy. Sometimes it doesn't actually work out. Sometimes it just hypes it up more. So it's like kind of getting in tune with that classroom energy level and allowing yourself to say, okay, actually, maybe we need a little quiet time. Maybe we need to sit at our desks alone and choose between reading or playing with Play-Doh. Maybe we need to do a visualization exercise. I have a whole set of visualization exercises that I do with kids. And so one of them is like, imagine a warm light, reaching down your head. What color is the light? Think about it as it travels down through your body, through your fingertips, all the way down to your toes. Now the warm light is reaching your heart. The warm light is like, can you feel like you are loved, cared about? Breathe in and just feel the warm light, filling up your body, up your heart, feeling it radiate out to others. And then deep breath in and out again. Notice how you feel. Imagine holding a special friend. Imagine leaning against a tree outside. What do you see? What do you hear around? What do you feel in the grass? Fingertips. Do you hear birds? What do you see? Kind of those really tuning into those senses. When my class is really intense, sometimes doing one of those things is such a better use of time, because all of a sudden after that, they're like, I'm kind of tired. And it's like they were so hyped. You would never have guessed they were tired. But it's like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I feel a little bit better now. And I can teach after that. I can do a lesson just after taking a few minutes to breathe. And my class knows as soon as I put up my hand that we're going to count, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2. Like as soon as I do that signal,
Yeah, I can see how that would change the energy in the classroom, because just like listening to you go through the warm light visualization, it calmed me. It really did. It calmed me. It relaxed me. It shifted my own energy, and I was already pretty relaxed. So,
yeah, and I did that a little bit faster than I would with kids. I kind of slowed down.
It was, that's a great example. I love this idea of remembering that just because they're energetic doesn't mean you need to feed into that. Sometimes, the counterbalance is good. Mm-hmm. What about the kids who don't seem to be responding to this kind of thing? We're going back to our focus on grace and consequences. What about the kids who need more support during these kinds of activities? Maybe the kids who have socialization issues or who aren't participating in class, aren't turning work in. What can we do for those kids in the final weeks and months of the school year?
I go back to reframing about take a break, really, really leaning into that. I use that a lot at the beginning of the year, and there is always a section of the year where I just don't need to use it as much anymore. We're in a groove, good classroom management, things are just kind of swimming along, maybe a few, problems, issues, individual problems, whatever. And then behaviors will kick up again. And every year, I have not quite learned this lesson yet, but every year I then am kind of trying to redirect behavior all the time. So like, oh, stop talking. Nope, put down your hand. Nope, put that away. I'm constantly trying to redirect behavior instead of leaning into just go take a break. And when I remember to do that, when that clicks again, that like, that's my response to calling out. It's my response to not keeping your hands to yourself. It's my response to a lot of things. And the more that I use that right away, as opposed to trying to redirect, and then, oh, shoot, now you hit someone. The more that I can just be like, go take a break, that's better.
And what do the kids do when you say that? What's their next action? What does that look like for them?
So I have 3 take a break spots in my classroom. Really only use 2 most of the time. At that little spot, there's a rug at one in the library, a coffee table, and then at the other there's a stool at like a high table, and then at another I have these little like beach chairs from some that are next to a table. And at each little spot there's a little jar that has a few fidget items in it. And so there's like a squishy ball. There's these tiny, tiny little stuffed animals that could like fit on a key ring. There's a few little like other fidget rings and these plus blocks, if you've ever seen those, that fit together to build 3D kind of shapes or just flat things. So there's a couple kind of soft things, hard things, whatever it is. With my sixth graders, I actually gave them each a little Altoid box and let them decorate it at the beginning of the year. And then I gave them, they could choose different yoga activities that we had done, and they got to keep little yoga cards in there. And then they had different things, and we called it our special place boxes. So like you can imagine whatever kind of special place can fit in the box, something that would calm you down, something that would make you feel good. And I gave them a whole bunch of random stuff to put in. Shells, rocks, bits of fabric and ribbon, and like bits and pieces that they could keep in there. So they had their own at their desk that I let them keep. But for my second graders right now, they just have these little 3 spots in the classroom. So they know I go through a whole routine at the beginning of the year of what do you do, and I model aloud. I do like a think aloud of what take a break looks like. So I have someone pretend to be the teacher, and then I pretend to talk to a friend, and they have to say, Amy, take a break. And they love that. And then and then I go take a break, and I kind of put my finger on my head, and I'm explaining how I would talk through that, how I might be frustrated. So I might say something like, I wasn't even talking. So-and-so was also talking. It's not my fault. And I just wanted to know about this weekend. And I still was listening to this story. And then I go and I sit down and I start playing with the things. And I'm like, oh, I wonder, make something for a second. Actually, I remember what's happening with everybody else. I'm going to, and so then I kind of wander.
So is take a break something that's available to all the kids? It's not just something where
in fact, I force everyone to take a break within the first week after I introduce it. I tell them that I send them on take a break. So I'm like, go practice take a break. And they're allowed to take. Yeah.
So it works in place of redirection, but also not only in that case, anytime a student finds that they need to take a break, that's available to them. Have you found any students taking advantage of that or using that time in ways that you find to be inappropriate?
Honestly, no, not much. Sometimes if I feel like I need to send them too many times, I will talk to them about it. And right when we start practicing, kids will sometimes spend a long time getting used to it. And some people call this sort of thing like a calm down corner, or I think there are lots of phrases for this. I still like the framing of take a break because I like that it still sounds like a consequence to me, but it's not negative necessarily, but it's also not really positive. So it's not like a reward, but it's just a need. And I know some teachers can take a break themselves. They tell kids, I might send myself on take a break because I need to calm down a second. And I think that really reframes it for kids a little bit. So even just doing that once.
Yeah, because that's a normal thing that all humans need to take a break from a situation. Sometimes it becomes overwhelming and you need to step away. I think that's great modeling.
Yeah. So a lot of socialization issues, if kids aren't participating in class, to me, that's different. So there's different functions of behavior, right? When you think about the whole science of behavior, there's escape, automatic, like you just do an automatic behavior every time. Tangibles, you're looking for something, like you're looking to touch something or you want food or whatever. And then there's attention. And so if someone is if the behavior is seeking attention, then I find take a break to be very good. If the behavior is really seeking an escape from something, then take a break is not going to work as much. So maybe you then want to lean into a loss of privilege, thinking about when it's so much easier for me to think about a privilege that I can take away versus a punishment. Because if I'm trying to come up with a punishment that's appropriate, that's really hard. That can happen sometimes if, like, you hurt someone's feelings, you need to apologize, or you were rude to a teacher, you need to write them a letter of apology, or you broke this, therefore you need to clean it up because you were not being careful. So that's an easy consequence to kind of see. But it's often easier for me to think, okay, so what could I give them that could then, I could take it away if they misuse it. So I give my class a 10-minute quiet time every day where they can basically do anything they want as long as that's independent and quiet. And I give them lots of options for that. But if they're not doing that appropriately, I just take it away. So it's a lot easier to sort of think about what can I give that then I can remove, as opposed to what can I just take away when I feel like I'm already restricting lots of choices. So it might be easier to say, okay, let's think about what can I add into my classroom environment. That was something that I was worried about when I really implemented lots of choice seating and flexible seating. And not even every kid in my class had a desk at that time. A lot of that has changed since COVID, but like right before that was really like the height of my flexible choice seating. And I was worried, and I'd heard other teachers worry about how that's giving them too much control. They're going to just go wild, and it's going to be chaos. But the thing is I knew I could just take it away. So it wasn't that big of a problem. I could give them lots of flexibility, and then, okay, you've proven that you're not doing well with that. We need to take that away, and we'll see when that privilege can be earned back. So I think some of that, if something is happening as a whole class, I think it's good to reflect through a class meeting, reflect about changes, reteach procedures. I do lots of like, let's try that again as a class, that kind of thing. Of just, okay, you need to redo whatever it was, go back and walk, kind of stuff.
What advice would you give to a teacher who feels like they've been showing grace and also doing a lot of the consequences and taking away privileges that you mentioned here, but feel like the class's behavior just seems to be getting worse?
Mm-hmm. I mentioned those 4 functions of behavior, and I think a lot of the attention-seeking behavior can get worse with certain reactions. I've heard people spin like, attention-seeking behavior is just connection-seeking. I don't think attention is inherently negative. I mean, I want attention. I want to be heard. So I don't think it's a bad thing to want attention. It's just something that I want. So if a kid is really doing a lot of attention-seeking behavior, and I think we know what some of those really annoying things are, sometimes we want to ignore it. We want to set it aside, but that's not going to solve the problem, because the point is they're looking for attention. So they're going to escalate their behavior until they get attention. And so for that, I think a behavior plan is really great. You've mentioned before, and I did this even before I heard you talk about on a podcast, like using beads on a pipe cleaner. So just stringing those things every time you see a good action, give them a bead, and that can be really quiet and kind of subversive. Just doing, I've done like check mark behavior lists before, where you're just looking for these certain things throughout the day. Right now I have a behavior for a kid, and it's just giving little dog bones to a dog a few times throughout the day just to check in. So that's a way to give attention without it being a really dramatic form. But keep in mind that like, if something is getting worse right away, when you start putting in place maybe a few more boundaries, or you start restricting certain activities, or you start being more consistent than you were before, like you were letting things go and realized that was not going to go well, and then you start restricting those things, behavior tends to get worse before it gets better. So that really helped me. Hearing the term extinction burst was like life-changing for me. I was like, okay, I just have to get through the extinction burst. Like, their behavior is going to get worse. I'm crossing a threshold, and then I should see a drop off after that. So kind of like pushing through that. Don't give up. Because they're just then going to escalate to a new level. So like, if you give in when they've reached something really intense, you give in, now you've just taught them that that's the new level they need to go to. So that's their new baseline. So it's like, okay, that's how hard I need to push you. Now I know. And so you gotta just be consistent through that. And then they will realize that you're going to stick with it. And, that's kind of more if it's really attention seeking. If a kid is just really rebellious and fighting against you, something that kind of clicked with me was listening to Gretchen Rubin's 4 Tendencies. She talks about how to deal with rebels, that you give them like information, consequence, choice. So you like give them information about what will happen if they make this bad choice and just like give them the information that you notice. So sometimes that will be me pulling over a kid and showing them my gradebook of like, these are the missing assignments that I see. This is what's happening right now. Or pulling them aside and telling them, I noticed that you moved 5 times in the past 15 minutes. So you're really shifting around the classroom a lot. And then you can explain what are the consequences of that happening right now. So going back to the grade book, like right now, what grade do you think I can give you based off of this kind of information? Or how much learning do you think you're getting done? How much work are you getting done by moving around constantly? And then give them the choice of like, okay, so either my grade book can stay the way it is, or you can make up work in these, this way. You can come see me before school. You can do this, blah, blah, blah. Or, you can either go work at your desk, or you can kind of keep moving around and see if that helps you. And then just leave them with the choice. Don't tell them like what the right choice is. Just walk away. Just that's it. And often they will do that, and those choices can be pretty restrictive. Like you can work here or there. You can skip ahead and work alone, or you can work with somebody else. You can work with the class, or you can work in another teacher's room. You can do your work now, or I will call your parents now. I can write an email saying how much you got done, or I can write an email about how much work you have to do. You can work with me and get it done, or you can try to do it by yourself. You can redo it for a better grade, keep the 0. You can do it now, or you can start in 5 minutes. Do you want help at the start of class, or do you want help at the end of class? So it's surprising how like, that's not a big choice. Do it now or in 5 minutes.
Right. Right.
It's not a big choice.
Right.
But
either one is fine.
Work. Yeah. So, if that's just a pushback against behavior, like they're just being rebellious to you, and that's annoying, then I would kind of go with that framework of information, consequences, choice, and then walk away and just let them make their choice and deal with the consequences. You explained the consequences. So as long as you follow through with that, don't lie about what the consequence will be. But as long as you follow through with that consequence, it's fine. And for kind of like, if they're really escaping, if there's lots of escape behaviors in your classroom, then is there a way for you to add in a choice time? I think we get so stressed out about testing, and honestly, I don't know how common this is all over the place, but it's probably pretty common. I feel like testing has increased post-COVID, trying to prove that we're closing gaps, trying to prove that we're using our time well, that, I'm worth my job. It's kind of crazy, but pushing harder into the academics is not going to solve your problem or theirs. So push against that feeling as much as you can. Think about what you can give to students. Think about that grace of giving without earning. That is what grace is. I'm just giving it to you. You haven't necessarily earned it. I think when we get too tied into everybody's on a behavior plan and everybody's working toward the treasure test or something, it's like, okay, like everybody's just earning this. Fun and rest and academic choice are embedded into the culture of my classroom. So that's just a given. It's not something that they have to earn. It's just, it's an expectation that I have for my own classroom. Now, if a student is not meeting the expectations I have of being kind and responsible and respectful within the culture of my classroom, I need to consider what consequence is going to best guide the student towards that behavior. So which consequence will create a connection between behavior and consequence? So this is the behavior, this is the consequence of that action. How can I really explain for them, like, okay, you broke this, therefore you have to clean it up. You hurt someone, you need to make reparations for them. You are not focusing, therefore you need to take a break. You are not using this tool well, therefore I'm going to take it away. You're not being safe, you lose the privilege of doing this thing. Sometimes we get concerned with that loss of control. It makes us really panicky. So we feel like we need to take away all of the things and just tighten up our classroom management. Don't let the panic kind of tighten you up. Don't let yourself forget those goals. Like I said, those goals of significance, belonging, and fun, like the fun, the rest, the academic choice, they are built into my classroom. So if I notice that I'm making myself reduce the culture of my classroom to something that I don't even want, I don't want to be in a place that doesn't have significance, belonging, and fun. And if I'm getting too tightly controlled, that I am kind of reducing that down, I need to give more grace. Like I need to loosen, and not necessarily loosen to the point of lowering expectations. That's not what I mean, but I need to not allow my own kind of tightening of classroom management to prevent me from creating the culture I want, because I can take something away, but first I need to give it. I can't take something away if I haven't given it in the first place.
Yeah, thinking about when that need for control is wearing up, that leaning into that need for control is very rarely the solution in my experience. The easing up is, yes, and it just feels so much lighter to ease up rather than try to tighten up. This is so good, Amy. I'm going to close out the show with a takeaway truth. What's something that you wish every teacher understood about student behavior in the final weeks of school?
I think it's easy to assume that behaviors are there to mess with you and test you and all of that. But students do want to feel happy. They want to feel good. They want to feel successful in your classroom. They want to feel smart. They want those things. And don't forget that whatever they're doing is what they think is going to either alleviate some kind of pain or try to get them to that feeling. Guilt and shame are not the feelings we want in our students. They're not the goals we have. Our goal is improved behavior. So focus on what you can do that's going to result